Hello, I'm Evi Danmor. I'm the author of the League of Extraordinary Women series, and I'm very excited that the first book in the series, Bringing Down the Duke, has now been translated into Russian and is going to be available to Russian readers soon. Now, Bringing Down the Duke is also my debut, and I'd like to tell you a bit more about the book. But before that, I think I'd want to share some information about the League of Extraordinary Women as a whole and what inspired me to write the series. So the League is centered around four young, very different women in 1880s England, and it is set at Oxford University because in 1879, Oxford opened its doors to women students for the very first time. So each one of the four women in the group that the story is about is involved in academics in some way or the other, and they are also all involved in the suffragist movement. Now, the suffragist movement was the early women's rights movement in Britain at the time, and the movement was lobbying for a woman's right to vote in Parliament, and it was also pushing for equality between husbands and wives in a marriage, because at the time that just was not the case. So these four women are very busy and they don't necessarily have romance on their mind, but because, it's very nice to have it all as a woman, actually, they of course find their big loves along the way whilst fighting for women's rights. And what inspired me to write this series is, I mentioned it already, it's quite nice, to not have to choose between a lovely relationship, but also having your rights and pursuing your personal interests. And I think even today that is sometimes difficult for women in a committed relationship because you're constantly torn between all these different things that require your time and energy and attention, and how you balance that is something that I personally find very interesting, and examining that in the context of the 19th century when all these external restrictions, particularly on women, were still so much stronger than they are today, was just a very interesting setting to think about love and what love could mean under those circumstances. And because the four women in the series are all so different from each other, it allowed me to really look at the whole, theme of love and fighting for what's right and trying to find a balance in life from very different perspectives. So that was very fun, and I had a lot of, research go into the topic as well, because the more I researched, the more fascinated I became by all these brave women who came before us, who in real life really paved the way for us to have more rights and more options today. So I'm hoping that in some way that the books are also a bit of a tribute to all these women who've come before us. And the setting in Oxford gives it a frame that I personally found really interesting as well, because I graduated from Oxford University, and it was a very, it was very formative years of my life, and it was great fun to revisit that, to actually revisit Oxford for my research, to go into the archives, to learn more about the first women who studied at the university at the time, and to let that inspire the women, the heroines of the four-book series. Now, Bringing Down the Duke is the story of Annabel and Sebastian. Annabel is an impoverished daughter of a vicar. She's one of the first women at Oxford University, and she can go there because the suffragist movement gave her a stipend. Now, in return for the stipend, she has to lobby influential men to support the women's rights movement, and while she's lobbying, she crosses paths with Sebastian Devereux, the Duke of Montgomery, and nothing really then works out the way it's supposed to. The two of them develop feelings, which they can't really have because they have completely different stations. And yes, if you want to know how they solve all these troubles and whether they can get together or not, you might want to read for yourself in Bringing Down the Duke. And if you enjoyed the book, there's 3 more books in the series. The next one will be Lucy's story, then Hattie's story, Katrina's story, and yeah, I hope you have fun with all of them. And if you want to say hello, I am also on Instagram as Evi the author, and I look forward to hearing from you. Большое вам спасибо.